and public education, by almost any objective standard, has made education worse, not better. By 1840, this country had near universal literacy among the non-slave population. Now, 40% of high school graduates are illiterate, according to the government's own figures. Progressive liberalism is a failed social policy.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed painfully obvious that he was claiming that he had data originating from the U.S. Census Bureau, which stated that literacy rates among high school graduates is only 60%. Now, when I heard a statistic like that, I knew he had to at least be missing something. My first guess was that he was confused about the definitions of literacy, because actually basic literacy would be just simply the ability to read and write. Literacy, as is often tested today among certain government organizations, is more geared towards reading level. The assumption is that the individual can read, but not well, perhaps. So they scale it actually, 1 through 5, and thereby they can give statistics on the relative reading levels of individuals. Every one of them can actually read, except for a very small minority, but the question is how. So the government, of course, has a vested interest in the ability of its citizens to read critically and understand complex material. Simply being able to read a newspaper is not enough, because so many jobs today require reading ability and writing ability, which goes far beyond that. After I asked for the sources in your comments section of your video, you put the 1840 census. Actually, it was kind of interesting looking at that. I think of note, and perhaps contrary to your own opinion, is this quote from that very source. If the other divisions be compared with New England, the number who cannot read and write is in the last 3.5 times as great in the middle states, 7 times as great in the northern states, 12 times in the southwestern states, and nearly 15 times in the southern states. The reason given is because of population density, because people are more likely to be able to go to school in cities in New England rather than in the much more rural areas of the South. Obviously, this problem, this defect at the time, has been since corrected. People that are still in rural areas actually are quite capable of getting to school. When I wanted to examine your actual claim as to the literacy rates of the United States, specifically whites, I did some checking on it, and it's quite obvious that you simply went to the table that had a ratio of the illiterate population to the general population, and you said, oh, it's 1 to 25 point whatever. That was the problem with that. The problem being the illiteracy rate was on the criteria of whites aged 20 and above. The data used to determine that ratio was actually the entire national white population. When you actually go back and correct for that, and I wasn't able to do so completely because of the limitation of the census data, but using the data for the total illiterate whites of ages 21 and higher, that number being 549,905 in 1840. Then I had to go to the tables for 1840 of overall population. It was divided between whites, blacks, males, and females. And I actually had to do some tallying, of course. They had a total of all the age groups, and then they had all those added together in a total. But of course, we didn't want all age groups because that includes infants. And the number of total whites of aged 20 and above, so we're actually including more than we should, given the literacy rate, criteria, we have 6,439,699 in 1840. That yields an illiteracy rate of over 8.539%. That is at odds with your claim, which, you know, if they hadn't been comparing the whole population to the illiterates in the other table that you actually looked at, you would have been pretty accurate. But that was your mistake. Now I can forgive a mistake like that, but the other sources you supplied, I'm sorry, but I believe it was done in a dishonest manner. I don't believe you actually referenced any of them in reality, or if you did, you didn't do so specifically for the data that you gave, and you just used it out of desperation, hoping that, or expecting that no one would actually look into it. Now, I did a copy and paste job of your original description box. Actually, right after you made the addition of your source, your supposed source, for the figure of 60% literate among high school graduates. And it was, I quote, "Info on the illiteracy of high school graduates, Bauman F.A. Jr., Johnny Can't Read Because Phonics Is All But Ignored, The Daily Californian, 16 February 1994, cited in Wiseman, Psychiatry, The Ultimate Betrayal, 275. Now, admittedly, it's cited in The Ultimate Betrayal, or rather Psychiatry, The Ultimate Betrayal. But that's really beside the point. You edited it, but it's not a big deal. I don't think you did so as a response to my video. That was never my claim. You edited it at some point, probably when you added the further sources. In any case, both sources, or rather both individuals named in that original source that you posted, Bauman and Wiseman, they're both Scientologist shills. So let's just rule that source out entirely. When I began to investigate the further sources offered, the source by McCurdy and Speich, as well as the Lean, A.E., and Eaton source, I immediately stumbled upon where I believe to be your source for all these citations, and it really gave me a laugh. Maybe you can deny this, but I think it's quite apparent, as you can see here. A simple Google search. Click on the link. And it doesn't take very long to see where your sources came from. As you can see, as originally pasted to your description box, this includes the data about Wiseman's book.
All of the evidence shows that these policies are destructive to our country, every bit as destructive as the war on drugs and the inflation tax. Two more things that modern liberals don't seem to want to get rid of, which harm the poor and minorities as much as anything else.
For someone who seems so very certain of his convictions, you'd think you would have given more time for research, or that you would have better data available to back up your outrageous claims. As to your final edition, the source to the ACT website, this does nothing at all to help you, as I stated in your comment section. This is, yet again, speaking of relative reading levels, and not simply the ability to read and write, which was the subject matter of the census in 1840. We really don't know the relative reading levels back then. Getting back to your original claim, the government's own figures, I'm very curious to know where you got that from. Maybe you can shed some light on the matter.